Prison for a 20-year sentence for making LSD. That's our second LSD chemist who got a 20-year sentence we have tonight. But Tim Scully was part of the Brotherhood of Eternal Love and made a lot of the over 100 million doses of acid back in the 60s.
Okay, thanks. The title of my talk is a sketch of the early history of underground LSD manufacturing. I'm going to start by giving you a little context. I first took LSD in April 1965, and the experience changed my life dramatically. The intense experience of oneness with the universe and the living things in it was so numinous that I was left feeling a strong compulsion to share this experience with as many people as possible. And that led me to make and to try to give away a lot of LSD. Over the following 5 years, I became Owsley Stanley's apprentice. He later became known as Bear Stanley. I worked with him in 2 laboratories and set up 2 more labs after he retired, and I eventually was sentenced to 20 years in prison as a result. Fortunately, my sentence was eventually reduced, and I ended up finally serving less than 4 years in McNeil Island Penitentiary. Years later, I began researching the history of underground LSD manufacturing. I spent over 10 years working part-time on gathering and organizing its history, and I'm still making a lot of new discoveries. By its nature, underground LSD manufacturing is clandestine and secret. I don't think the whole story will ever be known. But I've learned a lot more than I knew, and I began researching the subject, and I'm going to share a little bit of it with you here and now. I only have time to sketch a little of several complex stories, but you'll see that they eventually converge. I should add a cautionary note: the testimony in criminal trials isn't always truthful, and quite a bit of what follows comes from criminal trials. The first secret LSD manufacturing seems to have been done in service of governments. In the 1950s, the U.S. intelligence community reported that there were trainloads of ergot alkaloids moving behind the Iron Curtain. The fear was that Iron Curtain countries were making large amounts of LSD for use as a weapon. The American government responded by funding research by Eli Lilly and Company into industrial-scale LSD manufacturing, resulting in the Garbrack and Pioch patents. And an Army research program at Edgewood Arsenal into incapacitating drugs, including BZ and LSD. Dr. Jim Ketchum recalls seeing a drum containing perhaps 40 pounds of EA-1729. That was the Army code name for LSD-25 that appeared in his office at Edgewood Arsenal at one point. It disappeared a few days later. Meanwhile, on the civilian front, Bernard Copley was born in 1926 and raised in Nebraska. In the late 1940s, he moved to Joshua Tree, California, where he was a masonry worker and an unsuccessful building contractor. He was interested in hypnosis and metaphysics, and by the late 1950s, ran into Oscar Janiger, a psychiatrist in Los Angeles who enrolled him in experiments with LSD. In 1962, Bernard Copley was publishing a pamphlet, Hallucinogenic Drugs and Their Application to Extrasensory Perception, which he sold under the business name Hypnosophic Institute. Bernard Roseman was born in the Bronx, New York in 1933 or 4 and was raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He dropped out of high school after the 11th grade due to financial difficulties and traveled extensively through the United States and Mexico, collecting various reptiles and amphibians for the Philadelphia Zoological Gardens and the San Antonio Zoological Gardens. In 1957, he moved to Joshua Tree, California, where he studied reptiles and amphibians, and where he met Bernard Copley. By 1958, Bernard Roseman had returned to Philadelphia, where he met Dr. James Grossman, an organic chemist specializing in natural products and working for the Department of Agriculture in Philadelphia. Bernard Roseman and Dr. James Grossman traveled to California together, where Bernard Grossman introduced Dr. Grossman to Bernard Copley, and the three of them participated in a peyote ceremony. Bernard Grossman later shared an apartment in Los Angeles with Dr. James Grossman in 1960 when they both worked at Cal Biochem. During his 1964 trial, Bernard Grossman later claimed that they made LSD in Dr. Grossman's lab at Cal Biochem using the Garbarek method. Late in 1960, they traveled to Europe together, and during that visit, they visited the Weizmann Institute in Israel. During the first few months of 1963, Bernard Grossman and Bernard Copley traveled together, offering bulk impure liquid LSD, which they said was made in Israel, for sale to researchers and clinicians, including a Dr. Bivens, Myron Stolanoff at Menlo Park, Dr. Wilson Van Dusen at Mendocino State Hospital, Dr. Donald McDonald of Vancouver, Canada, and Dr. Ross McLean, also of Canada. Myron Stolanoff also looked at LSD and then reported them to the FDA. Bernard Grossman and Bernard Copley were arrested on April 3, 1963 after they sold an undercover FDA agent several grams of impure LSD, which they said had been made in Israel. They were charged with several crimes, most of which were misdemeanors, punishable by up to a year in jail, but one of which was a felony punishable by a longer prison sentence. The felony charge involved smuggling LSD into the United States. They spent the next year preparing for the trial, which took place in 1964. While he was free on bail, Bernard Grossman published a book, LSD, The Age of Mind, in which he briefly described making some very impure LSD. This was to his defense for the charge of smuggling LSD into the United States from Israel. He also wrote rather bitterly about Mr. Big in Canada, who bought gasoline for his Rolls-Royce and his airplane by selling LSD. These were references to Al Hubbard. Bernard Grossman believed Al Hubbard had convinced Myron Stolanoff to turn them in to the FDA. Meanwhile, also in 1963, in the fall, a young man named Douglas George was living in Los Angeles and working at Aerojet General as an atmospheric physicist. A friend invited Douglas George to attend a lecture by Dr. Paul Bindrum, a psychologist. Dr. Bindrum spoke about unusual states of consciousness, peak experiences that could be induced by taking LSD. Dr. Bindrum held up a sign with a patent number on it and told the audience that LSD was easy to make. Douglas George copied down the patent number and looked it up in the Los Angeles library. It was most likely the Peoc patent. Douglas George's memory isn't clear about all the details now. He was able to buy all the raw materials listed in patent, although he had to order some through his work at Aerojet General. By the fall of 1963, Douglas George moved to Hermosa Beach and set up a tiny lab in his rented house. He tried to follow the procedure in the patent several times, but it didn't work out. Douglas George started asking around, eventually ran into a young prodigy who was attending at Claremont Colleges working on his PhD in chemistry while he was only about 10 or 12 years old. That young fellow told Douglas George, oh yeah, the patent's incomplete. They left out a crucial step. Then he told Douglas George the missing step. Although he wasn't trained as a chemist, Douglas George was able to successfully make LSD once he had the missing step of the process. He ended up with green goo. In retrospect, the reason he ended up with green goo is because he omitted the purification steps at the end of the Peoc process. At the time, Douglas George told himself that the effective dose of LSD was so small that any impurities would not be toxic. So he just tried taking increasing amounts of the green goo until he got the desired effect. He increased the green dose 3 times in succession before he noticed an effect. He went to bed and had intense Technicolor dreams. Ruthie Brooks and a friend of his took some to Berkeley and spread the word that Douglas George had an acid factory. Half of Berkeley soon descended on Douglas George's and Hermosa Beach. Douglas George gave away the LD we made to anyone who asked for it. Augustus Owsley Stanley III was born in 1935 and was named for his grandfather, U.S. Senator and the Governor of Kentucky. He acquired the nickname Bear because he had a hairy chest at a young age. During the middle 1960s, he was Owsley Stanley. He was very intelligent and had a perfect conflict-having memory. His interests were broad and included art, ballet, Russian language, and electronics. When he became interested in a subject, he read everything he could on that subject. This habit would serve him well when he later decided to make LSD. In early 1964, another friend of Douglas George's, Ray Brown, gave Owsley Stanley some of Douglas George's LSD. It was Owsley's first LSD. A few months later, Owsley told friend and attorney Al Matthews that he'd taken LSD. Al Matthews gave him a count of Sanders LSD. Owsley discovered that the LSD he had previously taken was a pale imitation. That's when he decided that he should make his own to be sure of what he was getting. By June 1st, 1964, the San Francisco trial of Bernard Grossman and Bernard Copley was approaching its end, and the San Francisco Cold Bulletin published an article titled "The LSD Home Case," which mentioned an article in the Journal of Organic Chemistry by an Eli Lilly chemist describing how to make LSD. Newspaper articles about the trial also said that LSD was not difficult to make. Owsley Stanley read the newspaper articles with interest. Bernard Grossman and Bernard Copley were both convicted at the end of their trial, but they were allowed to list appeal bond, and they both jumped bail, one going to Mexico and the other to Brazil. They were eventually captured and sent to federal prison. Owsley Stanley, with his usual thoroughness, read everything he could find about the chemistry of making LSD, including the Garbrick patent mentioned in the newspaper article, the Pioch patent, and various papers and patents published by Hoffman and Stoll. All of the information he needed wasn't in any one patent or article, but he put the pieces of the puzzle together. The earliest articles about lysergic acid anodes from the 1930s explained most clearly about the delicacy of ergot alkaloids and the lysergic acid compounds and the special handling that they required. In the winter of 1964, Owsley Stanley bought 40 grams of lysergic acid from Sigma Chemical Company and made his first batch of LSD at the main factory in Berkeley using the Garbrick process. It wasn't pure enough to crystallize because it hadn't been through the chromatography. In February 1965, the new factory was raided, and Owsley Stanley moved his lab to a small room in the basement of a friend's house in Los Angeles. There he successfully learned to do chromatography and how to crystallize pure LSD. Shortly thereafter, he and Melissa Cargill rented a house of their own in Los Angeles on Lafler Road, where he set up a scale LSD lab. He bought another 400 grams of lysergic acid, this time from Cyclo Chemical Company, and he made several grams of pure crystalline LSD. He put some of it up number 5 gelatin capsules after mixing it with diluents and sold some of it by mail order. But he also sold a gram to a musician friend of his, Perry Letterman. Unexpectedly, Perry Letterman told everyone that he'd obtained the LSD he was selling from Owsley Stanley, and Owsley became instantly famous. His LSD was pure and the doses were strong, about 270 to 300 micrograms. Owsley soon learned that capping LSD learned inconsistencies in dose size due to variations in how his helpers had pressed powder into empty capsules. He bought tritiate boards of the kind used by compounding pharmacies and began making tablets, which were harder to counterfeit and which delivered much more consistent doses. His quest for quality also led him to initially dispersing the LSD on 10% tribasic calcium phosphate, which he said binds tightly to the LSD. before making up the remaining 90% of the tablet weight with lactose. He believed this kept the LSD evenly distributed throughout the volume of the tablet instead of migrating to the surface as the moist tablet dried. The surface of tablets, butters, or capsules is often exposed to damaging UV light, which breaks LSD down to undesirable and ineffective roomy LSD. The Los Angeles drug squad soon learned that Owsley Stanley had put him under surveillance. They went through his trash and found letters from his customers. They investigated and obtained copies of his orders for lysergic acid from Cyclochemical Company. All of these things were presented on May 13, 1966, U.S. Senate Subcommittee hearing on LSD and marijuana use on college campuses. By 1966, there were at least 2 large-scale underground labs producing large amounts of LSD. One was in Point Richmond, California, set up by Owsley Stanley and Melissa Cargill, where I worked as his apprentice. And he made about 300,000 doses, 85 grams of LSD that was later called white light. The other was in London, where Victor James Capler, operating New North chemists, began making rapidly increasing amounts of LSD using ergotoxin base as a starting material and employing the Huffman process with hydrazine. He bought a total of 6.3 kilos of ergotoxin between September 22nd and October 18, 1967. According to press reports, most of the LSD from his lab, with an alleged street value of $38 million, was sold in the United States. Press reports of drug quantities are often inflated, but Capler may have made as much as a kilo of LSD, a very large amount for that time. No chromatographic columns were found in his lab, so it's reasonable to assume that his LSD was impure. The number of new initiates to LSD grew very rapid between 1966 and 1970. According to a 2002 SAMHSA report, between 1966 and 70, the annual number of hallucinogen initiates rose almost sixfold, from 168,000 to 956,000. In the years between 1966 and 1970, many more underground LSD labs started production, with at least several independent ship manufacturing operations, including mine jointly with Owsley Stanley, which produced about 300 grams of pure LSD using the Garbrack process and chromatography. That was the first NCLEX in 1967. On my own, which produced a few grams of pure LSD using the Garbrack process and chromatography before it was busted. That was the second NCLEX in 1968. Mine jointly with Nick Sand, which produced over a kilo of Orange Sunshine LSD using the Garbrack process using chromatography. That was the Winter lab in 1968 and 69. And then the Clear Light group in San Francisco, which also used chromatography for purification, sold large amounts of Lindopane or Clear Light. There was the Speckled Barrel group in California, the Richard Barth Sanders system. He was also known as Eric Goetz. And their lab was in New York. And labs in Paris and Orleans managed by Ron Stork, which did not use chromatography. Larry Frieda's labs in California, Barry Orlando and Joel Weeks' lab in an Airstream chamber buried in the Southern California desert, making impure LSD. They used the Garbrack process and did not do chromatography. Richard Kemp's early Liverpool lab and DS's lab in Southern California. His full name is, unfortunately, Barber. There are many smaller LSD labs as well as almost certainly other part systems that haven't yet uncovered. Time doesn't permit going into further detail here, but you can see that there were many manufacturers using a variety of coupling methods and widely varying quality standards, dose sizes, etc. If you know of other LSD labs old enough to no longer be a criminal liability to anyone, want to share information with me, contact me at timothyscully@yahoo.com. Thanks.